I liked it down with the kids. Yep, he was
Starting?
Well, you know, I did have a really beautiful PowerPoint here, and it's not coming up, so I'd like you to imagine a really beautiful PowerPoint presentation.
Got it.
Okay. So thanks for coming today. This is, of course, Super Bowl Sunday, one of the high feasts of the church here. So thanks for making time out of your day for that. The idea behind this study was, you know, if you're a monk or a nun, you probably know how to do spirituality. You know, if you're praying for 8 hours a day, you probably know how to do spirituality. Okay. If you're like some brothers do, if you attend worship services 8 times a day, you probably are pretty good with spirituality. But for those of us who are just kind of regular people who have, you know, jobs or families or things to do, places to go, bills to pay, how can we be spiritual? How can we walk the way of Jesus if we don't have that kind of environment around us? So I'll give you a definition of spirituality here in a little bit, but I want to set the stage first. First of all, I think Lori passed these out. I'm going to collect these after you're done, after I'm done, or you're done. I'd like you to write something, identify something you learned, relearned, or thought was cool, identify something that made no sense, or something which you disagreed, maybe you didn't quite get your arms around it yet. And identify something about spirituality that you would like to explore in future sessions. So if you just want to write those down throughout I'll give you some time at the end, or if you think of it after we're done, please go ahead and write that down.
This pretty well covers it then. You gotta listen to the whole thing to get these first.
Yeah, you have to be here the whole time.
Okay.
They also found here some readers or some sort of glasses.
Right here. I was
Okay.
just digging through my pocket.
Well, I was wondering where you have your glasses, Tom.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, he's got too many.
thank you.
There you go.
So when you hear the word spirituality, what do you think of? Not necessarily
Religious.
what you believe, but maybe something you've heard.
Religious?
Something about being religious, sure.
Pictures of angels with halos.
Oh, pictures of angels, good.
With halos!
With halos.
I'll have one from Albert Einstein.
Okay.
A sense of awe and wonder.
Good.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's religious.
Sure. Good.
Otherworldliness, sorry,
Yeah.
or otherworld.
Other world, yeah.
Something beyond myself.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Something beyond myself. Yeah. Good.
Believing in something that you can't see and don't completely understand.
Oh, good. All right.
Watching the Northern Lights, if you can ever see a good display of that, it's tremendous.
Yes, good.
It's just awesome.
Talk about awe-inspiring, right?
Awe-inspiring, absolutely.
Good.
Well, how about just plain old sciences? Things we've learned about things we can't touch. I'm amazed by what man has discovered in the scientific field.
Yeah.
There's got to be a spiritual connection there, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I think of it as the work, the act of making meaning out of life.
Ah, good.
Mm-hmm.
Making meaning, good. Good. I had this wonderful picture of a cartoon of of two kids talking while they were playing, and one said to the other, "I'm not sure what our religion is, but it's the kind that won't let you run with scissors." And eating before supper is the worst sin. For some people, that's what spirituality is a list of do's and don'ts, right? Many of our evangelical friends have just long lists of what you can do and what you can't do, and stay away from the things that you can't do. And if you do those, you can ask for forgiveness, or because it's a sin. But you want to do the things that you should do to get up, and that's a lot of work. That's not how I see spirituality. My son has a business. His business is to he goes into organizations and helps them with their websites, redesigns their websites if that's what's needed, to help them with their social media, help them with video. He's very talented. In our family, talent skips a generation. Not at all. But he was talking with a builder recently. A guy, he's this organization that builds houses. And the owner is in his late 50s and spent his entire life building houses. Doesn't know anything about websites or social media or digital audiences or anything. And his website looked like it had been designed in 1995 and hasn't been changed since, which is true. And a lot of his younger employees kept saying, "You got to do something. You got to do something with the website, get on social media." And so the owner met with my son, and the owner says, "I don't know what we need, but we need something." And that's kind of what our soul says too. Is we're not sure what we need, but we need something. Okay. As long as this is Super Bowl Sunday, I'll talk for a second about football players. Football players have a high rate of depression, a high rate of mental illness, high rate of suicide, and part of that is the concussions. But it seems to be what the research says what that they have lost their sense of purpose. They used to be big, they're on the field, they were players, they celebrities almost. But suddenly, when they retire, they're nothing, and they just sit at home. And so without that sense of purpose, they get into alcohol. A lot of them get into drugs, things like that. And so that's kind of what it means by we're searching for something. And some people, like some football players, when they retire, they have that pain that they don't have a sense of purpose, and so they try to cover it up with drugs or alcohol. Okay. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Questions? Augustine said it this way, and I had a picture of Augustine.
Never looked better.
Use our imagination.
He's not one of my top 10 favorite saints, but he said, "Our hearts are restless until we find our rest in God." And that's kind of what spirituality is. We find our rest in God. The psalmist, I had a psalm up here. The Psalmist 63 talks about being thirsty for God. And throughout the Bible, thirst is a word that's often used when talking about God. My soul thirsts for you.
Well, it's a need that we have to have. It's a need that we have to have. I mean, If you want to equate that to physicality,
Good. Absolutely, good. Good, it's good, that's the same kind of thing, you got a need for it in real life, and same thing with the spiritual life. Jesus talks about, go ahead.
Can you say that Augustine thing again?
Yeah. Our hearts are restless until we find our rest in God. Jesus talked about, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Okay, that's spirituality, resting in God. And you rest when you find what you need. And that's how that is. So, yeah.
couldn't resting be thought of as a quiet mind?
Ah, yes, good. I think that's great.
Yeah.
My mind isn't very quiet at 3 in the morning. But usually because my dog wakes me up and wants to go potty. But yeah, I think quietness, in fact, we'll talk about that in a second with Elijah, but quietness is an important part of spirituality. Excuse me. So all of us are spiritual. All humans have this spirituality. Psychologists call it a human universal, because everybody has this capacity to have a sense that there's more out there. You know, and every clan and every tribe and every nation, and they all have religions. They have. There's Christian spirituality, of course, and there's Jewish spirituality and Muslim spirituality, and everybody has their own. What's interesting is even the Neanderthals, if you remember those guys, 40,000 years ago they died out, but they seem to have their own religion. Okay, because the people that they buried their dead, and they always put the same kind of red flower on top of the bodies before they buried it. So that suggests that there's something that that there was something symbolic about that. And you're all familiar with the people who say I'm spiritual but not religious. And they have a spirituality too. They ask different questions. Atheists ask different questions than Christians when they talk about spirituality. The atheist will ask things like, how can I be most authentic in the world? How can I thrive? How can I be connected with something larger, whether that something larger is, the Peace Corps, or save the whales, or volunteer at the food bank, or whatever. As we've already talked about, how to find purpose in life. That's something that is important, both for Christian spirituality as well as atheist spirituality. So we all seek a purpose. We all seek to be authentic in our relationships. We all seek to be connected with something larger. We all seek to thrive. And for Christians, we seek the sacred. Let me stop there. Questions, comments, so forth. So spirituality can be dormant, or it can be active. Dormant is dormant spirituality is when you don't have a purpose in life. You're just going through the motions. I'm going to church, but I don't know why. That's kind of a dormant spirituality. Or it can be active, when you're living out your life, you're living out your faith, using the gifts God's given. Spirituality can be life-giving, or it can be disempowering. So life-giving is when you use your spirituality to help cope with life and help you love others. And disempowering spirituality would be, God doesn't care about me, and nobody cares about me and nobody wants what I have to offer. Not really on any gifts anyway. And so that's disempowering to oneself. Spirituality can also be constructive or destructive. And constructive is using your gifts to help others, love others deeply, seeing God at work in your life. Destructive spirituality can be things like telling people, if you don't believe what I believe, you're going to hell. You know, you've heard things like that. Numbing ourselves with drug and alcohol so that we don't feel the need for spirituality, like I mentioned some football players do. Shaming others for their belief system.
Is that supposed to make a person feel good?
What, shaming?
Shaming somebody else, does that heap stuff on you as the shamer?
Yeah, if I shame you, I feel better about myself. Yeah, that's destructive spirituality, but yeah, kind of.
Also fear-based.
Fear-based, good. Do you want to say more about that after you're done coughing?
I think it's kind of what even though Patricia didn't get it, I mean, for me, it was fear-based for the longest time. And it wasn't until I could find a place where it was okay to have questions and okay to have doubts and, and okay to be who I am here, that it made a huge difference for me.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Lee.
Well, being one of many that's born and raised Catholic, you talk about a fear-based tradition. I remember being petrified that I had not fasted 3 hours before communion, that I had not been to confession within, the last year or 5 years or something. I have a lot to say. I got my money's worth. And the priest would say, I thought you were a nice guy. So anyway, but that's some traditions are so fear-based that Catholic is wonderful, but there's a lot of that in some traditions built in.
You bet. Good.
And when it's weaponized too, that we see now, church and Christianity as a weapon.
Right. Force it, when you force others to believe something that you believe, then or act a certain way, that's
very
destructive.
I was gonna say, I think it's also just the culture of Christianity. Sometimes it's that fear-based of like you meet up with like a relative that you haven't seen at a family reunion. You start talking, and it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Then that's where it comes from. It doesn't even come from people you know. It comes from the larger culture.
Yeah.
I think, at least from my standpoint, it also has been used to oppress people.
Yes.
Absolutely. And especially people of color, and being oppressed and being told, well, God wants you to follow what I say. I'm the master. You follow. This is So it's been used to oppress people.
Absolutely. There was a papal bull in the 15th or 16th century. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it basically said if you're exploring another country, and this is Doctrine of Discovery, that was the name. If you go sailing somewhere, you explore another country, and there's no Christians there, you can feel free to take it over.
Wow.
You can just enslave all the people there.
Well, that explains it all then. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's why Columbus, came into the West Indies and he enslaved a whole bunch of them. So that was common. So yeah.
Try being a Northern Liberal Lutheran. Deep in the heart of Southern Baptist Texas, son. You don't open your mouth. You have very few discussions unless you find other Northerners.
Yeah. That's another good example of a destructive spirituality. Some people hold their faith with such rigidity and such certainty that they lose all the awe, they lose all the mystery, they lose all the wonder. And boy, when that happens, then you've suddenly got yourself in destructive spirituality, both to yourself and to others.
Well, relative to all that, I wouldn't want to be God because of all the judgments I'd have to make.
That's true. That's true. And there are some people who think that that they get to help God with those judgments. You know.
Well, they found an answer. They
Yeah.
feel they have an answer.
Yeah.
And
So that's contrived though. Maybe they pray and they think. And then they go, oh, well, yeah, that feeds that. So it's more of feeds that mindset. Oh, I have the answer.
yeah, and certainty is a much more easy thing to live with in your head than doubt. And the unknown and the mystery and wonder, those are all hard things to keep in your head. Certainty is easy and fun. No? You want to say- what do you mean?
No, I can't handle certainty.
Well,
Seriously.
I don't, yes. For most people, certainty is easier. I'm not a big fan of certainty either, but yeah.
I think we're talking about the difference between religious beliefs and spirituality. Religious beliefs are the rules that you feel like you have to follow, and that's why there's spirituality in people who don't follow necessarily a religion.
Good point. Good, anybody else? So the point is that I was trying to make all people are spiritual. Here's a couple of things that aren't spirituality. And I had does anybody remember Grumpy Cat?
Yeah.
I had a great picture of him up here. Spirituality is not the same as getting close to God. Okay, God's already close to us. He's already as close as you can be. There's no getting close to God. You know, sometimes we're not aware of it, and that's partly what spirituality is becoming aware of God's presence. Another thing that spirituality isn't is praying all the time or reading the Bible all the time. And don't get me wrong, prayer and Bible study are great things, and I highly recommend them. But I know a lot of people who read the Bible all the time and have no sense of God in their life. You know, I mean, they know all the things they're supposed to obey. They know all the commandments by heart, but they don't have a sense of walking with God. Spirituality is not the same as being happy all the time. You know, it's not the same as being joyful. Joyful is great, but it's not. But being highly spiritual is not a guarantee that you're going to be highly joyful. Spirituality invites us to be who we are. So if we're a happy person, then be the best happy person you can be. And if you're grumpy, be the best grumpy person. That's kind of what I'm going for in my life. The best grumpy person there. So, well, spirituality is not becoming some kind of a prophet. Like, I don't know if you've turned on the TV or the social media, you can see all these people say, all these self-proclaimed prophets who are proclaiming, this is what God told me. And you know, we all know they're no more prophetic than a ham sandwich, but they believe it with all their heart that God told them to say this to people. Okay, questions, comments? Yeah.
It just seems to me if somebody's professing that sort of activity, there's always going to be somebody who's going to listen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's why some of these churches are really big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, going on from Jim. If you talk with them, how can you question them without getting the ABC memorized, whatever this is? Get a personal feel.
You mean, how do you talk to them? How do you?
Yeah, how can you at least have a civil conversation with these people?
Well, you listen, and why go there? I mean, what are they doing, controlling the conversation? I mean,
Some can.
if they do, you listen, and you can't, I don't like to judge people. I mean, if they, some people have a weird way of surviving, and or an outlook, but maybe they accomplish something too.
Yeah.
You know, even though they're a little off from you, you know, I don't like labeling people, but coping is my word for people who seem a little zealous.
That's how they cope.
That's how they cope. And I'm going, well, they're standing, and they get up every morning, they hold down a job, and let them talk.
Yeah, for me, I don't
Is it
feel
gonna-
any need to convert
Yeah.
those people. I'll listen to them, and I don't have any real interest in getting into it with them, unless they're interested, unless they have a question, and, you know. For me to say anything, you know, I have family members who if they start talking about Genesis 1, you know, they're talking about the only thing that Genesis 1 tells us is how many days, 24-hour days God took to you know, and if I suggest another interpretation, that's really threatening. I mean, that's their self-identity, you know, and I don't want to take that away, because then, well, how would they cope? What I hope for is that at some point they'll say, wow, I wonder if there's more to this story than God creating the world in 7 24-hour days. And that's when you have your opportunity to say something.
You can't have a discussion, religious constructive conversation with these people.
Not when they're not ready to.
Right.
There's one way only, and that's theirs. There is no discussion.
Were you going to say something, Brad?
Well, I was gonna say, you can see where it would be appealing if somebody has all the answers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes it easy, doesn't it? You don't have to think.
Yeah, that's kind of nice, yeah.
Well, that's these people I know anyway.
Okay, here's the definition of spirituality, and I had it up here so that you could remember it. Spirituality is noticing the presence of God. That's all it is. It's noticing the presence of God. And the funny thing about God's presence is He comes to us every day disguised as life. Okay? He comes to us disguised as life. So, some of you have heard me say this before, when I go out to the mailbox and get mail, and I come back into the house, my dog is impossibly happy that I came back. Can you see the presence of God in this?
Well, maybe there's some mail for him.
No, God comes to us disguised as a waitress who gets you something that you want that's not on the menu. Somebody who holds the door for you when your arms are full of packages. The receptionist at the dentist's office who makes you a little more comfortable. The nurse who laughs with you right before a scary test. Seeing the colors of a sunrise. enjoying a really fun TV show or a really meaningful show, going on a walk in a park, seeing flowers bloom where they shouldn't be. Can you see the presence of God in all those places? And if you can, that's spirituality. Spirituality is seeing where God is showing up in your life. And I'm not saying God is those things. I'm not saying God is the receptionist at the dentist's office. I'm not saying God is the dogs maybe, but not the nurse. So I'm not saying God is those things. I'm saying that God comes to us in a variety of ways every day, throughout the day, every day. And he comes to us in this wonderful string of interactions every day. And spirituality is noticing that. Okay. And so the beauty of spirituality, of Christian spirituality, is that vacuuming your house is just as sacred as evening prayer at a Benedictine monastery. Because faith helps us see the bigger picture. Helps us see the bigger picture of life.
Small blessings that make you smile.
Ah, good. Yep, that's spirituality. God comes to us in small, what did you say, small
blessings.
Small blessings that make you smile. Good. Questions? Yeah. Or comments?
Well, one of the overarching things I think about in these kinds of discussions is, what do we mean by God? What is the definition of God? And so if, I've said this before, if you ask somebody in the street if they believe in God, they'll say yes or no. But the God of your question may not be related at all to the God in their head,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
So how do we define God? Well, one way we define, it's kind of like an operational definition. We define God by what God does. We see in the world all those things you just mentioned, the small blessings. Well, God is the source of those blessings, let's say. But that doesn't really define God. It's an example.
So of what he does.
Yeah, of what he does.
In our life.
But still, it leaves a lot of questions about how you define God.
Well, are we trying to transcend something that is almost humanly impossible? I mean, God in the realm he exists in, if I can say he, use those terms, that's something way beyond the human capacity to understand.
Exactly. Good.
God is a mystery.
God is a mystery.
I mean, he's infinite, so therefore he's undefinable. He is bigger than life, you know.
We're trying to use human terms to describe something that you almost can't do it in human terms.
Sure.
My simplistic definition is in the Nicene Creed. I believe in creator of all things, comma, breath, seen and unseen. Everything.
Good.
I don't have to worry about it because it's done.
Spirituality all right, let's go 5 more minutes. Spirituality is noticing how God is afoot in our lives. So afoot is what's happening. It's something waiting to happen. Something you're expecting something. Watching for something. This is one of the reasons why Jesus always said, above all, watch. He said that over and over. Watch. So God is happening in our lives. God is always creating something new. And God is creating and recreating constantly, and in spirituality is watching And here's the thing about that is God always shows up in unexpected places. Okay? He always shows up where he's not supposed to be. There's a wonderful story in the book of Genesis. You might remember where Jacob is going along and he camps out for the night and he puts his head on a rock and he has this dream that the angels are ascending and descending on this big escalator from heaven. And he wakes up and he says this wonderful thing that I've said many times in my life. God was in this place and I did not know it. God was in this place and I didn't even know it. And that's and most of us can relate to that God, when God shows up in our lives, at first we don't even notice it. We don't even know it. But that's the thing. Elijah is a prophet in 1 Kings. And God told him at one point, says, Elijah, pay attention because I'm going to come by. And then he comes by first. Does anybody know this story? Comes by first in a huge, huge wind that is so powerful it rips up the mountains. And Elijah says, oh, that must be God. And God says no. And then an earthquake comes by. This huge, huge earthquake. And God says, oh, that's so powerful, that must be God. And God says, no. And then a fire comes by, and a pillar of fire comes by, and Elijah says, oh, that must be God. And God says, no. And then what? And then Elijah hears a still small voice. Elijah hears a gentle whisper, and that's where God has shown up. Okay. God was supposed to be in the wind and the fire and the earthquake because that's power. But no, he showed up in the still small voice. And then there's, if you think about the Christmas story for a minute, speaking of where God shows up when he's not supposed to, and some of you have heard me say this, in the Christmas story, the King of Kings should have been born in like the splendor of Rome, right? Or next to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. But he was born in a little backwater village on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. He should have been born to very rich and important parents, right? But they were Mary and Joseph were poverty-stricken. And he was born in a barn. And his bed was the stuff that the donkey was supposed to eat. The scholars and priests and important people should have been the first ones to hear the words from the angels that the Messiah had been born. But shepherds were the first. The shepherds were the lowest of the low on the social ladder. Shepherds weren't even allowed in the temple. They were hated. Okay? But they were the first people that the angels came to. Jewish scholars and priests should have been able to figure out the star and follow the star. But the only ones who followed the star were Babylonian astrologers. My point is God is always showing up, and he's showing up in your life all the time, and in my life. God is always showing up, but it's probably in ways that we don't expect. Spirituality is seeing that. Spirituality is noticing the presence of God. Questions?
One came to my mind about the presence of God is driving. While I'm driving, I'm at an intersection. I look to the left to clear myself. There's nobody coming. That's the operative word. There was.
Oh.
And things up here didn't compute. And I looked to my right and there was no cars coming. I pulled out and all of a sudden there was this person honking at me on my
I bet
left.
that was me.
And that's the moment I had that I thought, my goodness, the Lord is watching over me.
Yeah, good.
I mean, it's just.
Nice. Nice. Lee, you were gonna say something?
Me?
Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, so maybe we've danced around this, but I think part of it, and it's a big paradigm shift for some of us, is giving ourselves permission to smell the roses. You know, I mean, you're focused on getting to Aldi's because you got your list to do, and you pass by this beautiful rose garden.
Yeah.
Well, take time to do a little deviation and smell the roses. Have a glass of wine out on the dock, rather than doing all of the things you need to do at your lake cabin, for example.
Good.
Allow yourself that and permission to do those sorts of things.
Good, nice. Yeah, I was at a retreat once with a guy named Herb Brokereg. I don't know if you've ever, very famous author, poet, a couple of you nodding your heads. And it was time to go. He led the retreat, and it was time to go. And I was getting frustrated because nobody else was ready. I had my bags ready to go and ready to get in the cars, but nobody else was ready. And I'm like, why is it taking everybody so long? And then I noticed Herb was standing out next to the car with his bags. And I was inside, and I just stood there and looked at him, wondering, and he was staring at a tree, and had the biggest smile on his face. And I never asked him what he was looking at or what he saw in that tree, but I was, all flustered and frustrated, and I was taking all the time to do that, and he took that same time to stare at a tree and have the biggest smile on his face. And so, yeah, that's spirit.
Yeah.
It's giving you the permission to smell the roses, yes. Yeah. All right, next week we're going to talk about some of the building blocks of spirituality, and hopefully I'll have a really nice slideshow here.
Get your son to
Can't beat the
Maybe I gotta find my son.
Yeah.
And then the next week we'll talk about how spirituality helps us to navigate life. And then the last session, I'm not sure what we'll do yet, because it's going to depend on these things that you have in front of you. So if you can put a couple of words down or a sentence or something or on those sheets that I gave you, and we'll collect those. That's what that helps me to decide what you guys are interested in.
Are we supposed to hang on to these throughout the sessions then?
No, I'd like to collect them each time, at the end of each time. I'll give you a new set next week.
Thank you for that.
You betcha. So, if you wanna just put them on, maybe you put them with Lori. Yes. Give them to Lori on your way out, and so take as much time as you need to fill those out.